The desperate call, the crystal spires of Zephyrian Prime burned like dying stars against the black void of space. Elder Prism stood in the great observation chamber, his translucent body flickering with patterns of deep sorrow as he watched another city fall to the relentless bombardment. The Nexus Collective had arrived 3 days ago, and in that short time, they had reduced his beautiful world from a paradise of living crystal formations to a graveyard of shattered monuments. Through the chamber's walls, which were grown rather than built from his people's unique biocrystal technology, Prism could see the enemy fleet hovering like mechanical vultures over his dying world. The Nexus ships were nightmarish constructions of black metal and pulsing energy conduits, each one larger than the greatest Zephyrian city. Their weapons fired continuously, methodically destroying everything that made his world home to 3 billion peaceful beings. Navigator Echo burst into the chamber, her young form crackling with urgent light patterns that painted the walls in shades of desperate hope. Elder Prism turned to face her, noting how her usually pristine crystal skin now showed stress fractures from the constant fear that had gripped their people since the invasion began. Elder, I have found something in the deep archives, Echo said, her voice carrying the harmonic resonance typical of their species, but strained with exhaustion. There are records from before the Great Silence, mentions of a species that once fought wars across the galaxy. Prism's light patterns shifted to cautious interest despite the dire circumstances. The deep archives contained knowledge from thousands of years ago, much of it fragmented and difficult to interpret. His people had always been keepers of information, collecting and preserving data from across the known galaxy. But the oldest records were often incomplete. Show me what you have discovered, Prism said, moving toward the chamber's central data crystal, a massive formation that stored the collective knowledge of their civilization. Echo placed her hands on the crystal's surface, and immediately the chamber filled with holographic displays showing ancient star charts and text in dozens of different languages. Most of the information was corrupted or partial, but one section glowed brighter than the rest. Here, Elder, the records speak of a species called humans, from a world they named Earth in a system called Sol. The archives described them as too dangerous for civilized contact and mention something called the Quarantine Protocol. Prism studied the fragmented data, his patterns shifting to deep concentration. The records were indeed ancient, predating even the earliest Zephorian space travel by several centuries. What little information remained painted a picture of a species so militarily capable that the entire Galactic Council of that era had voted to isolate them completely. The texts mentioned something called the Hegemony Wars, Echo continued, highlighting another section of the archives. It says the human military forces were effective beyond all predictions. The records are damaged, but there are references to adaptive warfare, psychological operations, and something called total strategic dominance. A massive explosion rocked the chamber as another Nexus bombardment struck nearby. Through the crystal walls, they could see one of their sacred memory temples collapsing in slow motion. Its 1,000-year-old knowledge, crystals scattering like jeweled tears across the burning landscape. Elder Prism made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. Where is this soul system located? Echo's patterns brightened with surprise. Elder, surely you cannot be considering. The records clearly state that these humans were quarantined because they were deemed too dangerous for any contact with peaceful civilizations. Look around us, young navigator, Prism replied, gesturing toward the destruction visible through every wall of their crystal city. The Nexus Collective has shown us what true danger looks like. They have destroyed 17 worlds in this sector alone, enslaving or exterminating every peaceful species they encounter. Perhaps it is time to call upon danger to fight danger. The chamber shook again as Nexus forces landed on the planet's surface. Through their biocrystal communication, network reports were flooding in of ground forces beginning the systematic harvesting of Zephyrian survivors. The machine-enhanced soldiers of the Nexus showed no mercy, treating living beings as mere resources to be processed and utilized. Navigator Echo accessed the deep stellar charts, her light patterns now showing determined resolve despite her earlier concerns. "The Sol system is here," she said, highlighting a region of space that had been marked with warning symbols in every galactic database for centuries. "It is approximately 400 light-years from our position, beyond the edge of what was once considered civilized space." Elder Prism studied the coordinates, noting how the human quarantine zone was positioned far from any major trade routes or inhabited systems. The ancient Galactic Council had clearly taken extreme measures to ensure these humans remained isolated from the rest of galactic civilization. "Prepare a distress transmission," Prism ordered. "Include everything we know about our situation, our location, and the nature of the Nexus threat. Add samples of our language and cultural data so they can understand who we are and what we face." Echo's patterns flickered with uncertainty. "Elder, what if the old records are correct? What if these humans are as dangerous as the archives suggest? We could be inviting destruction from a different source." Prism looked out at his burning world, where millions of his people had already died and millions more faced enslavement. Or worse. The Nexus Collective had made it clear that surrender was not an option. They wanted the Zephyrian biocrystal technology and considered the people themselves to be expendable resources. "Navigator Echo, our choice is between certain extinction at the hands of the Nexus, or possible salvation from beings who might be equally dangerous but have not yet harmed us. I choose the possibility of hope over the certainty of death." The distress transmission array powered up with a deep resonance that echoed through the crystal structure of their city. This particular communication system had been designed to breach hyperspace barriers and reach across vast distances. Though it had never been used to contact a quarantined species before, as Echo prepared the message, she included detailed information about Zephyrian culture, emphasizing their peaceful nature and dedication to knowledge preservation. She also provided extensive data about the Nexus Collective, their military capabilities, and their pattern of systematic genocide across multiple star systems. "Transmission ready," Elder Echo announced, her hands hovering over the activation controls. Prism took one last look at the tactical displays, showing Nexus forces overwhelming their final defensive positions. In orbit, the enemy fleet continued its methodical destruction of everything the Zephyrians had built over millennia. On the surface, their crystal cities were being reduced to raw materials for the Nexus war machine. "Send the message," Prism ordered. The transmission burst into hyperspace with enough power to reach across hundreds of light-years in a matter of hours. As the signal raced toward the Forbidden Sol system, Prism wondered what they had just awakened. The ancient records suggested that humans had once been the galaxy's most feared warriors, but for centuries of isolation could have changed them in unimaginable ways. Deep in the Sol system, automated monitoring stations that had maintained silent watch for 400 years suddenly activated. The alien distress signal triggered protocols that had been dormant since the quarantine began, sending priority alerts racing toward Earth's orbital defense networks. On Lunar Station, Humanity's Primary Command Center, Admiral Sarah Chen, received the alert while reviewing routine patrol reports. The 50-year-old officer had spent her entire career preparing for a moment that she had never expected to actually arrive. First contact with an alien species seeking humanity's help. Admiral Chen was a product of Earth's isolation years, trained in military academies that had refined human warfare to levels that would have terrified the ancient Galactic Council. Humanity had spent 4 centuries developing their capabilities without interference or limitation, creating technologies and strategies that no other species had ever encountered. Analysis complete, Admiral, reported her communications officer, Lieutenant Xiao. The message originates from a species calling themselves Zephyrians. They're facing extinction from something called the Nexus Collective. The enemy force consists of over 800 warships equipped with advanced bombardment capabilities. Chen studied the decoded alien message, noting the sophisticated language patterns and the desperate tone of the communication. The Zephyrians had included detailed cultural information showing centuries of peaceful development and scientific advancement. They had also provided tactical data about their attackers that painted a picture of ruthless mechanical efficiency. "Sir, there's something else," Xiao continued. The Zephyrians specifically mentioned finding references to humanity in their archives. They know we were quarantined, and they're asking for our help anyway. They must be truly desperate. Admiral. Chen activated the station's main tactical display, showing the current positions of Earth's hidden fleets. Humanity had not been idle during their isolation. Secret shipyards throughout the Sol system had produced vessels incorporating for centuries of uninterrupted technological development. The fleets that now orbited Earth's outer planets represented military capabilities that no galactic power had ever seen. "Contact Fleet Admiral Torres at Europa Base," Chen ordered. "Tell him to prepare the first response fleet for immediate deployment. Authorization code, Chunseven." Throughout the Sol system, automated systems began responding to the Admiral's commands. On Europa, hidden beneath kilometers of ice, massive fleet yards opened their sealed docks for the first time in decades. Ships that had been built for a theoretical war were now preparing for actual combat. The flagship of humanity's response would be the HMS Prometheus, a dreadnought-class vessel that incorporated every advancement human military science had achieved during their centuries of isolation. Its adaptive AI systems, reality manipulation weapons, and defensive technologies represented the pinnacle of human engineering. As the human fleet prepared for deployment, Admiral Chen wondered what they would find when they reached the system. The galaxy had changed during humanity's absence, but one thing remained constant somewhere in space. Innocent people needed help, and humanity finally had the chance to provide it. The distress call had been answered. Now the galaxy would learn why humanity had once been considered too dangerous for civilized contact, and whether for centuries of isolation had made them more terrible or more merciful than the species that had once feared them enough to lock them away forever. When Deathworlders answered the HMS Prometheus dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zephyrian system, followed by 47 other vessels that materialized in perfect formation despite having traveled 400 light-years in less than 18 hours. Fleet Admiral Torres stood on the bridge of the massive dreadnought, studying sensor readings that showed a situation far more complex than anyone had anticipated. Multiple unknown contacts throughout the system, reported Captain Luna from her position at the tactical station. "We're detecting at least 6 different fleet signatures, none matching our databases. Some of these energy readings are Extraordinary. Torres frowned as he studied the holographic display. The human fleet had expected to find Nexus ships attacking defenseless Zephyrian civilians. Instead, they had arrived at what appeared to be a convergence point for several different advanced civilizations, all drawn by the same distress signal. That had brought humanity out of isolation. Analysis of unknown vessels, Torres requested, his weathered face showing the calm concentration of someone who had trained for this moment his entire career. Captain Luna manipulated the sensor displays, highlighting different contact groups. Fleet Alpha appears to be composed of vessels using some form of exotic matter manipulation. They're nearly invisible to our standard sensors. Fleet Beta shows technology signatures that predate our historical records by thousands of years. Fleet Gamma, ... double quotes. She paused, checking her readings again. Sir, Fleet Gamma appears to exist partially outside normal space-time. Intelligence Officer Reed added his findings from the advanced reconnaissance cruiser Shadow's Edge. Admiral, I'm detecting automated defense platforms throughout the system that weren't mentioned in the Zephyrian distress call. They appear to be ancient constructs, possibly dormant until recently. The power levels are beyond our measurement capabilities. Torres realized that the Zephyrian distress call had accomplished far more than simply reaching Earth. Somehow, their desperate message had triggered responses from across the galaxy, awakening powers that had remained hidden for millennia. The question was whether these other forces had come as protectors or predators. Sir, receiving urgent transmission from Zephyrian survivors, announced Communications Officer Park. They're reporting that Nexus ground forces have begun harvesting operations on their homeworld. Estimated time until complete population processing is less than 4 hours. On the main display, Torres could see the tactical situation in the inner system. Hundreds of Nexus warships were systematically destroying the remaining Zephyrian strongholds, their energy weapons turning crystal cities into molten slag. The mechanical precision of the attack showed no awareness that their actions had attracted the attention of multiple advanced civilizations. All ships, battle stations, Torres ordered. We proceed with rescue operations regardless of other complications. Humanity answered the Zephyrian call for help, and we honor our commitments. Deep in the system's core, Elder Prism watched from the command center of his people's last intact orbital station as another transport full of refugees exploded under Nexus bombardment. The crystalline structures of his homeworld below were now mostly ruins, and the harvesting machines had begun processing the survivors with mechanical efficiency. Elder, massive energy signatures detected throughout the outer system. Navigator Echo reported, her light patterns flickering with amazement. The readings suggest multiple advanced fleets, all approaching our position. Prism studied the sensor data with growing hope tinged by uncertainty. Their simple distress call had somehow attracted responses from across known space. Species and civilizations that the Zephyrians had never encountered were converging on their system, drawn by their plea for help. How many different groups are responding? Prism asked. At least 7 distinct technological signatures, Echo replied. One matches the energy patterns we detected from the Sol system, but the others are completely unknown. Some of these readings suggest capabilities far beyond anything the Nexus possesses. Overlord Terminus commanded the Nexus assault from the bridge of his flagship Absolute Dominion, a massive construction of black metal and pulsing energy conduits that served as both warship and mobile processing facility. His partially mechanical form showed satisfaction as he monitored the systematic harvesting of Zephyrian biocrystal technology and population resources. Status report on resource acquisition, Terminus demanded, his voice a blend of organic speech and electronic modulation that reflected his species' cybernetic enhancements. 87% of Zephyrian settlements have been processed, reported his tactical coordinator. Biocrystal extraction is proceeding ahead of schedule. Population harvesting has yielded approximately 2.1 billion units suitable for labor. Assignments? Terminus nodded with mechanical precision. The Nexus Collective had built their empire on the complete utilization of conquered civilizations. Nothing was wasted. Populations became labor forces. Technologies were assimilated, and planets were stripped of all useful materials before being abandoned as dead rocks. What Overlord Terminus did not realize was that his systematic destruction of the Zephyrians had triggered automatic responses from defense networks established eons ago. Ancient powers that had withdrawn from galactic affairs were now stirring, awakened by the approaching extinction of an entire peaceful species. The first to reveal themselves were vessels from the Eternal Archive, a mysterious civilization that claimed to preserve the memory of every species that had ever achieved spaceflight. Their ships began emerging from what appeared to be folded space, materializing like ghosts near the system's edge. Unknown fleet, identify yourselves. Came a transmission on frequencies that shouldn't have been possible to access. The Eternal Archive recognizes the distress patterns of a catalogued species. State your intentions regarding the Zephyrian preservation protocols. Fleet Admiral Torres stared at the communication display in amazement. The message had bypassed every security system on the Prometheus without triggering a single alarm. Whatever technology the Eternal Archive possessed, it operated on principles that human science couldn't immediately understand. "This is Fleet Admiral Torres of the Earth Defense Force," he responded. "We are responding to a distress call from the Zephyr people. Our intention is to provide military assistance against the Nexus Collective invasion." A pause followed, during which Torres could feel his ship being scanned by technologies that registered as barely perceptible fluctuations in local space-time. When the Archive responded, their message carried undertones of what might have been approval, species designation, human, historical classification, quarantined, Deathworlder, combat effectiveness, extreme, query accepted. The Archive will observe your intervention methods. Torres felt a chill at the casual mention of humanity's historical classification. The term Deathworlder was reserved for species so capable that their very existence threatened the stability of galactic civilization. That these unknown beings possessed detailed records of human capabilities suggested they had been watching Earth's quarantine zone for centuries. "Admiral, detecting massive hyperspace disturbance," Captain Luna reported. "Something big is coming out of jump near the Nexus fleet position." What emerged from hyperspace was unlike anything in human databases. The vessel appeared to be constructed from living metal that flowed and shifted as if it were a liquid temporarily holding a solid shape. It was enormous, easily 3 times the size of the largest Nexus battleship, and it radiated an aura of ancient power that made nearby space. Itself seemed to bend. "Unknown vessel, you have interfered with Nexus Collective resource acquisition operations." Overlord Terminus transmitted toward the newcomer. "Withdraw immediately or face the consequences of opposing our expansion protocols." The response came, not as a transmission, but as a direct insertion of concepts into the minds of every conscious being in the system. The communication bypassed language entirely, conveying meaning through pure thought. "We are the Shapers. We forged the first tools and taught the first fires. We remember when your kind crawled from primordial circuits, and we remember why the galaxy learned to fear the sound of human engines in the void. Today, you face judgment for crimes against creation itself. Torres felt his crew members straighten at their stations. The message had somehow conveyed not just words but emotions: anger at the Nexus atrocities, respect for Zephyrian culture, and something that might have been anticipation regarding humanity's response to the crisis. All human vessels, this is Admiral Torres, he announced over the fleet communication network. Unknown alien forces are intervening in this situation, but our mission parameters remain unchanged. We came here to protect the Zephyrians, and that is exactly what we're going to do. The HMS Prometheus and her escort vessels accelerated toward the inner system, their advanced propulsion systems allowing them to reach combat velocity faster than should have been physically possible. As they moved, the human ships began deploying weapons that no other species had ever encountered. Captain Marcus Steele, commanding the assault destroyer, Retribution, activated his ship's signature system, a reality manipulation array that could alter the fundamental properties of space around enemy vessels. Target the lead Nexus battle group, he ordered his weapons officer. Show them what for centuries of military development looks like. The human fleet opened fire with weapons that redefined the concept of space combat. Gravitational manipulation beams tore Nexus ships apart at the molecular level. Quantum disruption arrays caused enemy vessels to simply cease existing in normal spacetime. Temporal distortion weapons created localized time dilation fields that trapped Nexus ships in bubbles of accelerated entropy. But the most devastating weapon in the human arsenal wasn't technological, it was psychological. As the Nexus Collective watched their seemingly invincible fleet being systematically destroyed by vessels that fought with impossible precision and coordination, their legendary discipline began to crack. Impossible, Overlord Terminus muttered as he watched a human destroyer single-handedly eliminate an entire Nexus battle group. No organic species possesses such military capabilities. Our intelligence networks have no record of this level of technological advancement. Dr. Helena Voss, humanity's chief xenobiologist aboard the command ship, monitored Nexus communications from her position in the intelligence center. Admiral, the enemy is showing signs of psychological breakdown. Their communications are becoming increasingly erratic as they try to understand our capabilities. Torres nodded grimly. This was exactly what human military strategists had predicted during their centuries of isolation. Any species that achieved galactic dominance through conventional warfare would be unprepared for enemies who approached combat as both an art and a science. The battle for Zephyrian Prime lasted exactly 47 minutes. When it ended, the Nexus Collective's seemingly unstoppable armada was nothing more than debris scattered across the system. The few surviving Nexus vessels fled into hyperspace, carrying with them the terrifying knowledge that the galaxy's most feared Deathworlders had returned. Elder Prism stood in his command center, watching human vessels descend toward his burning world. His people's bioluminescent patterns showed a mixture of gratitude, amazement, and lingering fear as they observed their rescuers' capabilities. Navigator Echo, open a communication channel to the human fleet, Prism ordered. This is Admiral Torres of the Earth Defense Force, came the response. Zephyrian survivors, you are now under human protection. We will provide medical assistance, reconstruction support, and long-term security guarantees. The Nexus Collective will not threaten your people again. Prism felt patterns of profound relief spreading through his crystalline form. Admiral Torres, our people owe you a debt that can never be repaid. You have saved our civilization from extinction. No debt is owed, Torres replied. Protecting peaceful species from aggressive predators is simply what civilized beings do. We're sorry it took us so long to respond to your call, as human ships began rescue and reconstruction operations. Other alien fleets that had responded to the Zephyrian distress call started revealing themselves. The Eternal Archive emerged from their folded space to begin documenting the battle. The Shapers descended toward the planet to assist with rebuilding efforts using their reality manipulation technologies. Ambassador Lyra materialized aboard the Prometheus through some form of advanced teleportation technology, representing what she claimed was an alliance of species that had been waiting centuries for humanity's return to galactic affairs. Admiral Torres, she said, her form shifting between different alien physiologies, as if she were a projection rather than a physical being. The galaxy has changed during your people's isolation. Aggressive empires, like the Nexus, have filled the power vacuum left by your quarantine. Many peaceful species have suffered without protectors capable of matching such threats. Torres studied the alien ambassador, noting the advanced technologies she represented and the implications of her words. Are you suggesting that humanity's isolation was a mistake? I am suggesting, Lyra replied, that the galaxy needs its guardians to return. The old Galactic Council that quarantined your people no longer exists. The civilizations that once feared human military capabilities now desperately need them to survive. As reconstruction efforts continued on Zephyr Prime, news of the battle spread across galactic communication networks. The return of humanity, the species once considered too dangerous for civilized contact, sent shockwaves through established power structures throughout known space. Some species reacted with terror, remembering ancient warnings about human warfare capabilities. Others responded with hope, seeing the possibility of protection against the aggressive empires that had dominated galactic politics during humanity's absence. Admiral Torres stood on the bridge of the Prometheus, looking out at the stars and contemplating the choice before his people. For 4 centuries, Earth had remained isolated from galactic civilization. Now they had the opportunity to reclaim their place among the stars. But doing so would mean accepting responsibility for protecting peaceful species against threats they couldn't handle alone. The decision wouldn't be his to make alone. But Torres knew what his recommendation would be when he reported back to Earth's leadership. The galaxy needed guardians, and humanity had the strength to serve in that role. The question was whether they were ready to leave their isolation behind and embrace the responsibilities that came with being the galaxy's most feared and most needed protectors. The Zephyrian distress call had been answered, but it had also awakened something larger, the return of humanity to a galaxy that had both feared and missed them during their long absence from the stars.